us live for another Thursday night on Buckeyes Battle Cry. We, if you missed it, we went live on Big Ten Team Rivalry Show. That was on Monday night. Spent 2 hours and 15 minutes on there live. It was a lot of fun. We had a blast talking all things Ohio State, Michigan. We talked all things the rivalry, the game, the best rivalry in all the sports. It was quite a lot of fun to have that discussion and be invited onto their show. Tonight, just a heads up, I'm going solo dolo. Rob's got some things he's got to do with some family, and obviously family takes precedence, and that's the way it should be, I mean, it's summertime, the weather's getting nice out, and you got to spend time with the family when you can. So yeah, shout out to Rob for getting that family time and prioritizing that. That's really awesome and really good to see. Tonight we got some interesting topics lined up. It's going to be, we're going to be talking a little bit college football expansion. We're not going to go as long tonight, probably about 30 minutes or so. And, just be me. So be active in the chat, be active in the comments. We'd love to hear from you tonight. I'd love to hear from you tonight. We're going to be talking, like I said, college football expansion, how it's difficult to keep up with all the different moves. Obviously, Texas and Oklahoma off to the SEC. That's weird. USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon now in the Big Ten. That's weird. Probably shouldn't be that way, but that's the way it is. The Big 12 has lost their biggest brands to the SEC, and of course, they added teams like Central Florida, SMU. Just some obscure teams. Obviously, West Virginia a few years ago, so that was interesting. But it's really hard to keep up with all the expansion moves. And I'm a diehard college football fan. The thing that always helped me in the past with college football expansion was the football game. And thankfully, we had that football game, coming back here. July 19th is when that thing drops. Cannot wait for that football game to drop. On the PS5, still got to grab my PS5, however. Still got to grab that thing. So this is also an Ask Me Anything college football related. What's going on, man? Go Bucks. What's up? You excited for the NCAA 25 coming out? Hey, are you a gamer of any chance? Or when was your last Ohio State game they got to attend in person? Mine was actually last year, the 2023 Ohio State-Michigan State blowout under the lights. Supposedly supposed to be a gray out, but it never worked out that way. The fans, the big colors in Ohio State gear right now are obviously scarlet. And, oh, heck yeah. It's always got to be the first game versus that team up north. But yeah, the big color schemes that are sold in stores now are obviously scarlet and black, and so the gray out last year just didn't work. Marvin Harrison had a field day, 3 touchdowns and over 200 yards receiving, so that was amazing. What's up, OHIO guys? Welcome on in. And so that was my last game in the shoe. Been a couple Big Ten championship games myself. We're going to talk some of the college football expansion tonight. We're going to talk the conference realignment. We're going to talk about the naming rights, how fields are going to be sold out to the highest bidder from corporate sponsors. We're going to look into that, and we're also going to talk about how conferences, the Big 12 specifically, is looking to partner with a PE firm, a private equity firm, to take over and kind of make up the gap between the Big 10 and the SEC and the Big 12 and the ACC, the gap that is there. Chase chimes in. He says, mine was the one versus Florida Atlantic. It was Fields first. Heck yeah, he had that big run at the start of the game. I remember that. But I'm going to the Western Michigan game. I don't know why. It's a night game. But yeah, no, it's just crazy. I think a lot of it is because the Fox Big Noon kickoff has kind of made noon a prime time spot now. It's kind of ridiculous to see Western Michigan and Akron a couple of years ago in Kyle McCord filling in for C.J. Stroud when he did in his first ever start for the Buckeyes. That was a night game too in the shoe. And things have really changed. Like I know with the media rights and the TV deal rights, they continue to fight for that prime time slot. And especially now with CBS leaving the SEC behind and coming to the Big Ten, that's going to create a lot of 3:30 primetime matchups as well. No, exactly. Definitely like that game for sure. That was just the first one, and we're like, what? And obviously, with CBS coming to the Big Ten, yeah, it was in 21, yep. CBS now joining, broadcasting Big Ten games. It's interesting because obviously, they're going to put some primetime games on there. We're looking at potentially Ohio State, Oregon at 3:30 on CBS, or it might be on NBC at 7:30 out in Eugene this year, October 12th. Going to be a fabulous matchup. Can't wait for that one. That's one of the most highly anticipated games of the season. Certainly going to be a top 5 matchup, as Oregon doesn't play Michigan until later in the season. They don't play Penn State. And then, of course, they host us. That's Ohio State's first big game of the year. So it's going to be interesting to see what games get filled into what slot this year, because the Big Ten has the NBC fighting over it, has CBS fighting over it, and, of course, Fox's big noon hype train that they have kind of continued on. You get some below average games at noon on the Fox Big Noon as well early in the season. And that's kind of what happened with CBS with the Ohio State Akron game to kick off the year. It'd be great to have Brad Nessler back broadcasting Big Ten games. He used to do it for ABC back in the day in the mid to late 2000s. That was a lot of fun. He kind of took over for Brent Musburger. I don't know how old you are, but yeah, it'll be interesting. Brad Nessler called the 2014 Ohio State-Alabama game, obviously in the Sugar Bowl. We all loved his call because we won. Let's just be real. We beat Alabama, so we loved his call of the game. And so that's kind of interesting. But it will be unique to see which games get slotted into which broadcast. And obviously Fox is going to stick with their noontime as their primetime slots. You're going to have, of course, Ohio State Michigan is already slotted to play in that time slot, in that time frame. It's looking like Penn State versus Ohio State is going to be a 3:30 or 7:30 game as well. They're still fighting for that rights. My buddy Rob, my co-partner on this channel, he's going to that game, and so it's gonna be fabulous. He's praying for the night game, whiteout atmosphere, and I love those kind of matchups at night more so anyway. Yes, it's more challenging for the Buckeyes, of course it is, but the environment they create is second to none. LSU is right there with them, of course. I think, Death Valley, it gets rowdy, and it's 92,000 down there in Baton Rouge, and they have one of the best night game environments as well. Yeah, that'd be sick, man. I look forward to those games. Yes, it's definitely much more of a challenge going in, playing at night than it was at noon 2 years ago, like we did in 2022, and that was a fight in itself, but didn't have that night game all day building up atmosphere, which creates even more pressure for the away team and gets the home fans in the whiteout a little more drunk. So Mark's chiming in. He says, I wish Ohio State versus that team up north could be a night game. There's some years I kind of wish that could happen. I love tradition. I love college football tradition. That game has traditionally been played at noon or 1 o'clock, throughout its history. And so we've certainly lost a lot of traditions, but the 2006 game versus Michigan in the Horseshoe at night was absolutely epic. So epic. To have that game, the second half being dark, the 1 versus 2 matchup, it just heightened everything. But for me, that game makes me so nervous. I kind of hate having to wait more than past noon to get to that game and get that game kicked off. It's one of those intense games, pit of the stomach games that just makes me so nervous and makes me so anxious that it's so much harder to wait. I know back in 2006, I was in high school, and oh man, that'd been amazing. Having gone to the game, Chase. Your neighbors went to it. I remember I always had the Ohio State Michigan party in my house. My friends and I we just played football, until the 3:30 kickoff back in 2006. And so that's something we did back then. Ohio State just started winning so much that all my Michigan friends, I live in Michigan, all my Michigan fan friends, they stopped coming over. So because they knew the result before it even started. Unfortunately, the tide has shifted in that rivalry, and the Buckeyes have to win that thing back on the field. Night game versus Ohio State Michigan. I think they should throw it in every once in a while. I mean, the last 3 years, there's opportunities to do that again. And I actually worked in 2022 during the game, so I was furious that I had to miss. I could watch it because I was a salesman, and basically no one was coming in that day. I live in the Ann Arbor area, and nobody came in. they're all at home watching the game, and so we got to pull it up on the computer screen and whatnot. And we watched the game that way, but it was a little harder to watch it that way. I was hoping for a 3:30 that game that day because I got off at 4, and I was like, all right, I'll just DVR a little bit and get home and catch up, and I'll be caught up by halftime. And it never happened in that way. But Walter chiming in, he says the Ohio State last play in South Bend still haunts me. What got me more upset was Parker's stupid play calling that gave Ohio State the ball back. No doubt. Now I haven't watched too many highlights of that game since because of just the way the game the season unfolded for Ohio State. You must be an ND fan. There's definitely Ohio State's definitely talk for night games for sure. Western Michigan night game, yep. So anyway, the Notre Dame game. Notre Dame went into kind of a prevent defense on that last drive, and the fact that Ohio State did get the ball back wasn't necessarily because of aggressive play calling on the defensive side of the ball. It was more so that Notre Dame went into a conservative shell, hoping they could run it a couple times and pick up the first down, and they couldn't, so they punt away, giving Ohio State one last chance to win the football game. And then, of course, I think, Ohio State benefited from it, but Mecca Abuka continually going up the seam, just, it was that prevent defense that Notre Dame was in. And then they almost slammed the door shut on the goal line. They almost got the pick on the last drive, too. Kyle McCord was a dropped interception away from losing that game as well on that last possession. And then, of course, the 1-yard punch in by Mayan Williams barely getting in. Or was that Chip Trayanum? Chip Trayanum. And, only had 10 men on the field instead of the 11. That was a costly error as well, of course, Walter, man. I've been on the other side of results like that. Not many from an Ohio State perspective, to be honest. We've had a lot of great comebacks. 2017, Ohio State, Penn State. 2018, Ohio State, Penn State. 2005, OSU, Michigan was another great comeback for the Buckeyes. Mark says, Notre Dame didn't do themselves any favor. Gotta admit, McCord played great that game, especially at the end. He didn't play like that the rest of the year. He really didn't, man. And I was ready to crown him after that game-winning drive. It showed how clutch he was. Now, Michigan, unfortunately, to their credit, I do give them a little bit of credit because they allowed some yards there at the end, obviously. We drove on them. We drove to the 37-yard line. But they were staying aggressive. Ohio State just has that elite talent where they can get down the field, even though Michigan didn't go into prevent defense. I think they learned a lot from that Notre Dame game and didn't decide to go into that as well. But they still applied pressure and blitzes, and it paid off for them, unfortunately. It made me sick, dude. Especially living where I live, it was really painful to have to suffer a third straight loss, especially when Michigan went on to do what they ended up doing. That really sucked. We were so close, just 37 yards away from doing it again. But Kyle played poorly in the Wisconsin game. He played poorly in, he just missed a lot of open receivers. And, we had a lot of talent. His first interception versus Michigan was really inexcusable. Basically threw it right to Will Johnson. Walter chimes in again. He says, and that questionable at best fourth down decision that spotted Ohio State that first score. Oh, yeah, sure. Now I remember that you mentioned it. QB sneak instead of giving the ball to Estime. If you're going to get beat with your best. Oh, nice, Chase. I was at the spring game as well. Me and Rob, my co-host, we went down to the spring game as well. He'd actually never been to a spring game. I've been to like 9 or 10 of them because they're just so affordable. I feel like might as well make the trip down from Michigan to Columbus, and it's a lot of fun doing that. It's a cheap day. There's a lot of activities, a lot of stuff to do. Obviously, go out to eat after the game, and there's a lot of fun to go ahead and do. So, has anybody in the chat been to any of the Big Ten championship games? I attended the 2014 Big Ten championship game. I really hope he is, Mark. I really hope he is. I attended the 2017 and 2018 Big Ten championship games over Wisconsin and over Northwestern. That was the last Big Ten title game I went to. Surprisingly or not, the Big Ten championship games are a lot cheaper than regular season games at Ohio Stadium. They're $75 face value. So if you didn't know that, if you get in early, in the buying process, go ahead and do that because it's really it's really a lot more affordable than Ohio State, Penn State, or Ohio State, you know, Oregon in the future, or Ohio State, Michigan, of course. I looked into tickets, Rob and I did, and they were over $600 already. So obviously got to wait for them to drop. Yeah, they were really impressive, man. They overcame a lot of adversity, Walter. I'll get to your comments, Mark, as well. Will Howard is going to be so good in Ohio State offense. I hope he is, man. He was not impressive in the spring game, but he'd only been on campus a few months, and so you got to take that into account. He's getting accustomed to the speed of his receivers, the eliteness of his receivers. They clearly didn't have at Kansas State. 3-star coming out of high school. He's got a lot of potential to tap in, and he can run it a lot better than Common Core did, and was willing to. Now, it comes down to the offense. What kind of offense are they going to run? Because Day himself really prefers a pro spread passing offense as opposed to Chip Kelly, a run spread passing offense. And, Day has really taken control in the big moments and kind of let down in some of the big moments. And so that's interesting. Oh my gosh, it was. Yeah. And then the 2020 Big Ten. Yeah, they were a more balanced team. Our offense in 2002 was predicated on Maurice Clarett. That defense, both defenses in 2002 and 2014 were cream of the crop, shut down the superstar talents of the Miami Hurricanes offense. Of course, every single one of them players on that offense for the Hurricanes went to play in the pros, and many Buckeye defenders from the 02 team went on to play in the pros as well too. I would take 2014 over 2002. We dominated a lot more opponents in 2014. Of course, Braxton Miller went down in the fall camp, and I thought the season was doomed. We lost the previous 2 games, and then we won the opener and then lost to Virginia Tech, and I was like, oh gosh, here we go, man. This is going to be insane. But they ended up winning the whole shebang with a third-string quarterback because of an elite defense and a pounding run game, much like, unfortunately, the 2023 Michigan Wolverine National Championship team. Walter chiming in, he says, you think Lee Corso has one more season left? He got me into watching game day. Oh, man. He was really struggling, man. It's hard to watch. It's hard to. I know he just does a couple segments now, and of course they brought in Pat McAfee to fill in that void for Lee, who he can never be replaced. I mean, he has so much enthusiasm as well as so much knowledge for the game of football, and it's really interesting. The impact he's had on so many young viewers like myself and like you, Walter. I wonder if they're going to continue the tradition of the mascot donning once Corso is done, or if they'll retire that. I mean, you got to keep it going. I'll be honest, the last couple of years, I've watched Fox's Big Noon kickoff show as opposed to College Game Day. Now, of course, I grew up on Game Day, but I find Fox's Big Noon kickoff a little more fresh, a little more compelling at this stage. But when it comes down to the picks, the last 10 minutes before the broadcasts go live at noon, I always switch back to Game Day to see what course is going to do and what they have to say about the predictions for all the big games of that Saturday. We got coming up on 8 Saturdays until week 0 is here, and then of course 9 Saturdays until the biggest of the big games and the official start of the college football season comes. We're all looking forward to that. We're super stoked. Who is your favorite Buckeye of all time? I'm 35 years old. Now the question is of all time. Okay. I'll answer it 2 ways: my lifetime and all time. My lifetime, I would have to say Mike Doss. I love defense. I love lockdown defense. And Mike Doss was a 3-time consensus All-American, meaning he was an All-American in every publication that votes on that. And so he was so locked down. He was so ball hawking. He was so hard hitting. Chris Gamble is a very close second because he was Mr. Do-It-All, Mr. Everything for Ohio State. And then if I had to say all time, I'd probably say Jack Tatum, the assassin. Obviously never saw him play, just saw highlights and all that, and got to got to. I mean, you're nicknamed the assassin at safety. Like, I gotta freaking love you. Burrow's taking heads off, not just in college, but also in the NFL. And so that was a lot of fun researching him and reading some books about him. That was a fun time. But going back up to Chase's comment, he said the 2020 Northwestern Big Ten Championship was scary in the first half. It was. They were shutting down Justin Fields. They were shutting down our passing attack and our elite receivers, and then thankfully Trey Sermon took over and ran for 331 yards, setting the all-time Ohio State rushing record, and obviously getting us to the playoffs where we wait, what year was that? Oh yeah, 2020, where we smashed Clemson and then got smashed by Alabama, of course. So it's interesting, but yeah, man. I mean, it's been a lot of fun following Ohio State, living in Michigan. Had a lot of smack talk over the years, that's for sure. We've had a lot of fun with it, and the tide has unfortunately turned. And it's up to Ryan Day and this 2024 Buckeye squad to shift that rivalry back and shift that narrative back by taking it on the field. You know, a lot of people are saying, you know, this cheating scandal is why Michigan elevated, and I think that's part of it. But it's also that they had an elite staff. Now that elite staff is gone, though, and that excites me because Harbaugh is gone. The entire defensive staff is gone. Troy Smith. He was the Wolverine Slayer, bro. The ultimate Wolverine Slayer. That dude was nightmare to defend in the Fiesta Bowl, which gave him an early lead in the Heisman. Yeah, he's my favorite quarterback of my lifetime. There's no question about that. We've had some great ones, of course, with Braxton, JT, Terrell Pryor, Dwayne Haskins, Justin Fields, and others. And Joe Germain in 1998 was one of my favorites as well. But Troy Smith, you know, I was going through high school in that time, and the rivalry really was super, super heated back then, even more so because Michigan had dominated the 90s. And yeah, we'd won the national title in 02, but then Michigan took a game back in 03. He was 3-0 over that team up north as a starter, and that was a lot of fun to watch, man. He's the ultimate Wolverine Slayer, and he was so dynamic. On third downs, he was the offense. He was going to find a way to get a first down. It's just that simple. He really was. And so, yeah, man, he's definitely my favorite Buckeye quarterback of my lifetime. The only quarterback Heisman winning Ohio State QB of my lifetime as well. And I think the only Ohio State quarterback to ever win the Heisman. Chick Harley was before the Heisman became a thing. He was kind of a do-it-all back in the 1918, 1919, and 1920 season, of course. You know, I'm a Buckeye nut, Buckeye historian. You know, I read a lot of history books and a lot of Big Ten history books. And, you know, it's just fun to read about some of those old school players. But, of course we had Archie. We had Howard Hopalong Cassidy, our first Heisman winner, running back. And then, of course, Eddie George in 95. And then, of course, Troy Smith at quarterback in 06, winning the Heisman. Unfortunately, falling short of the ultimate goal, getting smashed by a 2-loss Florida team. We thought we had everything won and beaten, especially with our undefeated record, just beating the number 2 team in the country, especially when everybody thought Michigan was legitimate number 2 team in the country. And then we just get absolutely destroyed by Florida because we thought we had the game won already. Mark chimes in. He says, do you think Ohio State can go 12-0 in the regular season? I rarely predict a team to go 12-0. They're a team that is super set up well for it. But everything does come down to offensive line play for me. Oregon is kind of a toss-up game for me right now. It's kind of a 50-50 game because it's in Eugene. They have so much talent, so much firepower. But I think their offensive lines... Oh, yeah. No doubt about it, A.J. Hawk. He's definitely my favorite linebacker, man. The flow that he had was amazing. But, yeah, going back to the season 12-0 question, I think the Buckeyes are going to go 11-1. Now, if that loss was to come to Oregon as opposed to Michigan, I'd be okay with that. If it's the reverse, I don't think I'd be okay with that, man. Dropping 4 straight to the U of M where I live, that's not acceptable, man. It's just not acceptable. And yeah, Justin Fry really needs to step up. Rob is really my co-host. He's really hammering home that point where Ohio State needs to step up their offensive line recruiting. I think it really comes down to O-line, whether Ohio State can go undefeated or 11-1 in the regular season. Oregon's lines are a little small for me. They're coming over in the Big Ten, and I think for the first couple years, their offensive lines and defensive lines are not going to be big enough to compete with the Big Ten lines. And Big Ten football, as we all know, is won in the trenches. Now, Ohio State has a lot of skilled players, a lot of great quarterbacks, a lot of great wide receivers, Abuka, Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Ennis, Mylan Graham, all those guys. It'd be phenomenal. They have a chance at it. To Walter's question, did you ever try going to OSU at U of M at the Big House? Now, I've never been to an Ohio State Michigan game at the Big House. I've been to 2 Buckeye Wolverine games, and they're both in Columbus, and they're both years that Ohio State won the national championship that season. Of course, 02 and 14. I was gifted tickets both times. My cousin was the president of the Alumni Association out in California, and he gifted me tickets. My father and I tickets to the 02 game, which was a party atmosphere. The police and the dogs were surrounding both goalposts in 2002. They'd grease up the goalposts. Buckeye fans still got them down, but they pepper sprayed all the fans to try and keep them off the field. And my dad wouldn't let me go on the field and storm the field that year. 2014, of course, we won that game as well and went on to win the national championships. Man City, it all comes down to Oregon. They're the only real team on that schedule. I mean, from an outsider's perspective, I can see what you're saying. We were saying on the Big Ten Team Rivalry show that we were on Monday. Go check that out if you haven't. We were saying the Oregon's lines are not quite prepared for big boy smash mouth football. And honestly, Ohio State's got some improvement to do on that offensive line as well. That's going to be a pivotal matchup for the season, though. And if they lose that game, there will be extreme toxicity in the Ohio State fan base. Extreme toxicity. It's just the way it is. Because we don't play anybody before Oregon. We have five full weeks, but only 4 games, and they're all cupcakes before that Oregon game, that road trip out to Eugene. And if we fall flat on our face on that one, I'm not going on message boards for a while. I personally think Ohio State fans overdo it with storming the field. They've actually been there before. You're not wrong. It's one of those things that should be a little rare. It should be a little rare to storm the field, that occurrence. It just should be. Wolfie checking in. He says, as a Michigan fan, I'm worried. Y'all look tough. Well, the thing is, we got Quinshon Judkins and Trayvon Henderson coming back. We have 11 players that are coming back that could have been drafted. Only 2 draft-eligible players went to the draft out of 13. That was obviously Marvin Harrison and Mike Hall, defensive tackle. So we bring back a ton of talent. And, of course, everybody knows we added a lot of talent in the offseason portal to kind of secure the secondary, secure the offensive lineup a little bit with Seth McLaughlin. Yeah, no doubt, Rand City. That was a lot of fun, man. I'm glad you joined that broadcast. It's going to be interesting because Ohio State is kind of shifting offensive identity, if they are actually shifting identity. If Ryan Day has actually handed the keys of the offense over to Chip Kelly, that's going to be huge because will he actually suffice and relinquish control and trust his mentor, Chip Kelly, enough to surrender that control of the offense in those key moments? Because he really does shrivel up in those big moments. Ryan Day does. And he's young. He's still got a lot to learn. And honestly, now I don't want this to happen, but if he was to get fired, at any point, I could see him winning a national championship at another school. He's still a very young guy. He's 44 years old, I believe, and he's still got a lot to learn, a lot of growth to gain, a lot of knowledge to gain, and what it takes to. Yeah, their offense is really. I don't think Orgy is the dude. I really don't think Orgy is the dude. But yeah, I could see Ryan Day winning a national championship. Hopefully, it's at Ohio State though. Hopefully, he stays for a long time. But we'll see what happens. Um, let's see. No faith in QB room. You got Warren Davis, Jack Tuttle, and Alex Orgy. What I saw out of Alex Orgy in the spring game, his footwork was really poor. Like his drop back was extremely and exceptionally poor. And I wanted to get into that in the team rivalry show. We didn't talk much about Michigan. We talked mainly about Ohio State on the Michigan channel there, them kind of interviewing us. But yeah, they got some growth to do in that room. And I know their offense is predicated on the run game, but they're replacing all 5 offensive linemen, every single one of them. Walter chimes in. He says, let's see, or Rand City first. So I think it's nice to have someone in full control of your offense if you can trust them. Just trusting Chip Clay that much is insane to me. Yeah, you might be right about that, man. I mean, 10 years ago, nobody would say that's insane, but now maybe 10 years later, after some NFL stints, and obviously the UCLA stint, his pedigree has fallen off a little bit, but he was certainly an innovator, and he still is. And I think he's gonna implement some things that are gonna take some teams by surprise, especially when you have a power back like Quinshon Judkins to get those important yardage in those short yard situations where Ohio State has really struggled in, to be honest. So Walter says, I was at the Notre Dame Clemson game in 2002. Wow. I got to be on the field. It was probably the only time you couldn't literally see the field after a win. All the other times it was just a puddle of fans. What about Notre Dame, Georgia? Did they storm the field for that game too when Notre Dame beat Georgia in Notre Dame Stadium? That was a phenomenal game for all of college football too, obviously. Although Georgia kind of took over that stadium. There was a lot of red in that stadium from what I remember. Don't remember the year of that game. I think it might have been 2019. But anyway, yeah, both Ohio State and Michigan have questions at quarterback this year, and it's going to be really interesting to see how those quarterbacks develop. And what's cool about the placement of the Ohio State Michigan game is it's at the end of the year where teams have time to develop and grow and figure out who they are. Now, Ohio State themselves, they don't have a lot to figure out. They kind of know who they are, but at the same time, they're shifting identities a little bit, and so that'd be unique to see. Because of that game, or I mean, most college football fans do. Let's just be real. Obviously, Notre Dame, 2 playoff appearances, neither went well. They played in 2012 versus Alabama, a year where Ohio State went undefeated. Should have been Ohio State versus Notre Dame in the championship game, but Ohio State was on postseason probation. Alabama obviously destroyed Monte Teo and his fake girlfriend in Notre Dame. That was rough, man. I was watching that. I was down at school in Indiana and watching that. And so we were hoping for a good contest because it's 2 blue bloods of college football. Obviously, Notre Dame hasn't won a title since 88. 20-19 in 2017. A sack fumble ended it. Yeah, that's right. Okay. I hear what you're saying, Rand City, and that is the opinion of most college football. I really wish they would join a conference. I really wish they would. I think conference realignment as it is going to force them eventually to do it, but maybe they'll stick to their guns. I don't know. What do you think, Walter? What do you think? I mean, to Rand City's point, yeah, I definitely hate the independent thing too. But they used to make a lot more money than everybody else. But since money is flooded in the sport, they're making a lot less than other schools now too. And the NBC contract is not going to pay as much now because they're broadcasting Big Ten football games. And so that hurts them a little bit, of course. If you're joining, man, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you could, man, we'd love to have you talk football all season. We go live every Thursday, 8:30. Rob and I usually, my co-host is out tonight. Walter chiming in, kind of defending his program a little bit. He says, well, the good thing is about independent thing is scheduling whoever you want. The day Notre Dame has no choice is the day, right. And ultimately, it's going to come down to money because money is flooding the sport right now. And I think Notre Dame is starting to get left behind in terms of the money. the NBC contract used to be so exclusive to them, and they used to rake in the money, and that's why they did it. And I think they've kind of done this kind of nose in the air thing, where they're we're going to have to join this conference. We're going to join the Big Ten in hockey. We're going to join the ACC in all of the sports and remain independent in football. And it's kind of a weird thing to say, I think when NCAA college football video game comes out, I'm putting Notre Dame in the Big Ten anyway, even though they've had their chances. So it's kind of like to hell with Notre Dame. Notre Dame, in terms of their scheduling, I agree and disagree. I mean, every school, even in conferences, schedules some FCS games and some non-Power 5 games. They have rivalries that rivalries ebb and flow, whereas the Michigan-Notre Dame game, Michigan was poor for many of those years. And, of course, Notre Dame was poor for many of those years. And, of course, USC has dipped since the Pete Carroll years. But to their credit, they scheduled the Clemsons of the world. They scheduled the Georgia of the world. Boston College, a traditional rivalry there, a Catholic rivalry there. They've got some big boys on their schedule year in, year out. But they also have some easy cupcake wins. But so does the SEC and the Big Ten teams. Ohio State's schedule is a joke this year outside of the conference, They're going to have 3 ranked teams on the schedule. It comes down to 3 games: Oregon, Penn State, and Michigan. There's no sexy matchup now. We do play Texas, and we do play Georgia and Alabama coming up in years to come. We'll see if those get stuck with. That would be phenomenal to see happen. I hope they do stick with them. We had a Tennessee schedule a couple years ago. We had to cancel. I forget the reason why on that one. They weren't good anyway in those years. So let's see. Mark says, if Ryan Day were to go to the NFL, do you think Ohio State would go after Marcus Freeman? No. I don't see him as a good enough recruiter. There's a couple names out there that Buckeye fans like to throw around. Obviously, Luke Fickell took Cincinnati to the playoffs. He's trying to rebuild Wisconsin in his kind of mold, in his, defense first, mobile quarterback, a Tressel-like offense, under Troy Smith and Terrell Pryor, of course. He's trying to do it his way. He's kind of changing Wisconsin identity. So Luke Fickell is one of them. Mike Vrabel is the one that I see touted the most. I know he said he despises recruiting, and that will never work at Ohio State. A head coach that doesn't like recruiting, that just won't happen. Yes, he was a former player, former All-American, and a former stud on the defensive line for us, and was on staff under Urban Meyer, and had a successful NFL tenure. But I think he's just through and through an NFL guy. I don't see Mike Vrabel ever coming to Ohio State. Cliff chimes in and says, Athlon is predicting an Ohio State versus Georgia national championship. Do you think it'll happen? I mean, those are the top 2 teams right now. What's up, Cliff, by the way? Those are the top 2 teams entering the season. This 12-team playoff makes it so much harder to predict because you have to win so many more games. Now, obviously, you get that first round bye, but I think there'll be more upsets. Now, I personally just wanted an 18 playoff. I think 12 is too far, and I think 16, which we'll get to eventually, is a little too far. Because most years, this last year was an exception. There are about 6 teams that were playoff worthy. But most years, there's 3 to 4 teams that are playoff worthy. And so for those 2 top teams to get to the final, I'd love to see it, first and foremost. I really would. But do I think it happens? I think one of the 2 of them slip up for sure. So I'm going to say no, I don't think it happens, Cliff. Man, see, this may be biased, but the Big Ten, ACC, and Big 12 are weak. Wow. Big Ten has Ohio State and Oregon. The ACC, dang, he's taking shots tonight. And Oregon, like ACC has nobody, and the Big 12 has nobody. The SEC is a clear number 1. It's not close. I don't think they're the clear number 1 anymore. They are the number 1 overall conference, yes. They are, but it's not this massive gap between the SEC and the Big Ten. Penn State gets overlooked because they drop all the big games, and I get that. Michigan just won the national title. Ohio State's there every year. Oregon is getting added to the echelon, and I think USC will be back at some point. They still have to field the defense. That's going to take some years. It's going to be interesting. That's quite the shot fired across the bow, though. Let's see. We got Wolfie chiming in. Ohio State to Natty for sure. Hard to tell who else. Everyone looks pretty good this year, minus some teams. Every team has their flaw, that's for sure. I know. I would say Georgia has the best quarterback in the nation. Maybe Texas and Quinn Ewers, of course, they have the argument as well. But Texas lost so many people to the NFL. They lost 11 players got drafted, and other players that didn't get drafted. So they basically just returned Quinn Ewers. Now they have solid recruiting and solid O-lines and D-lines. Big hog molly offensive lines that are ready for the SEC. And so that'd be phenomenal to watch them play. I can't wait for those new matchups. I think Oklahoma gets destroyed in the SEC for the next couple of years. I don't think they're quite ready for that. Walter chiming back in and says, the Big 12 Conference makes no sense with the championships. What's the point of divisions when you can win them and not get in? Might as well not have a division. That's why the Big Ten went divisionless. Yeah, they definitely went divisionless for that reason. Would love a UGA versus Ohio State rematch. It was phenomenal in 2022. What a matchup that was. Came down to the wire, of course, a shanked field goal. Wolfie says, we'll continue to play for Ohio, Michigan, Natty. That would be insane if that were to happen. And it might happen, some years. This last three-year run has been interesting because it's not often throughout history that Ohio State and Michigan are both super elite at the same time. And so the last 3 years have been phenomenal to watch. Obviously, we'll see how Michigan transfers to the new head coach and what they have to bring to the table and what they offer. I think Rancity says, can we call the Big Ten the Big 18? They have so many teams. We need a new name. I know that's against tradition. I'm a huge traditionalist, but we need to be called the Midwest Conference now. We used to be the Western Conference, for those of you who don't know, because we were the furthest West Conference formerly, before the Pac-12 got formed, of course. And then the Big 12 was the Big 8, the SWC, Southwest Conference, and then, of course, became the Big 12. Certainly needs some new names. We do want to get into a little bit of the discussion I have for tonight, but this has been a lot of fun that we're discussing so far. So Mark chiming in. Oh, hot take from Jared. He says, hot take, Purdue is making the college football playoff. I would love for that to happen. They make some serious upsets over the last 25 years. They've blown a lot of Ohio State seasons. In fact, get this right. Ohio State Michigan and Purdue are tied for the most wins over Ohio State in the 21st century. They would both have 5 wins over the Buckeyes. Purdue, yeah, they do. It's crazy to think about, but it's true. Who from Ohio State can legit be a Heisman finalist? Okay, here's the thing. This year, I don't see a Heisman finalist from Ohio State. If I were to guess, it'd be a receiver. It'd be a Mecca. I just don't think they have a guy because our O-line has so many questions. To Ranci's point, Judkins would be my second choice, but since our O-line has so much to work on and so much to prove, preseason before I see it, you got to prove it to me. I don't see a running back from Ohio State being anywhere near the Heisman consideration at the end of the season. Maybe a September Heisman as we, pummel the teams that we're playing. But yeah, that would be quite the thing. But I want to get your guys' thoughts on some of the stories the last day or two have been interesting that have come out. The naming rights for the Big 12, private equity firm is gonna take over the naming rights of the Big 12 conference. It's going to be called All-State 12 or whatever it's going to be called. Whoever takes over. That's just crazy to me, man. Like, everything is getting sold in money rights. Now, Michigan, actually, their athletic director position has a naming right. Somebody bought the naming rights, and every time there's a press release or there's a announcement in the media, they have to use the John Ira or whatever it is, athletic director. position. And so, everything is going to naming rights and being sold to the highest bidder. And it's really interesting. It's kind of sad. Hot take: Carnell Tate will be an All-American. I don't think that's a hot take, bro. Not outside of Ohio State fan base, it is. Not many people know who Carnell Tate is. He had about 450 yards receiving last year as our third option. He's a phenomenal route runner. Super quick. Brandon Innes, Jeremiah Smith, obviously Emeka Ibuka, and Carnell Tate are in for quite the season if Will Howard can deliver at the quarterback position. Thoughts on Clemson and FSU to SEC or Big Ten? Yeah, Jared, good question, man. That's expansion. I know Rand City would chime in. He didn't want anything to do with Clemson or FSU. He despises both programs. Yeah, that's right. All right, each chiming in already. It says they FSU and Clemson fit. They fit culturally for sure. But we don't want them. He says, Crybaby State, an overrated university. Clemson on the decline, and they don't offer much in terms of any other athletic programs. Obviously it's a football-driven decision to join, to add teams and to expand conferences, and realignment has all been football-driven. Basketball has a slight say in it, of course, as well. But more often than not, it's a football-based decision. And Florida State and Clemson don't offer anything in basketball. Now, their baseball teams, sure, they might be decent, yeah. But that doesn't move the needle financially. So, in order to the Big Ten, I would be opposed to both. I think if you're going to add somebody, I think you add North Carolina. I think you look at, unfortunately, Notre Dame. They offer a lot athletically, and they're already in the Big Ten in hockey. They've just been dragging their foot with that over the multiple years of invites, and they've never accepted. So it's kind of like a to hell with Notre Dame type of situation for Buckeye fans or Big Ten fans in general. Another team that used to be a power, a college football power, that was in the discussions when Rutgers and Maryland disgustingly joined the conference. I know why. It's the media rights deal of the DMV area and, of course, New York City, and that's worked out really well for the Big Ten in terms of money coming to the sport. In terms of on-field production, in football and basketball combined, Maryland and Rutgers have only won one Big Ten championship. That was a basketball championship. And they don't bring too much else to the table on those two fronts. The big revenue sports, of course. So, yeah. Sorry, I never got to that team. Pittsburgh is a team that was used to be really good in basketball, used to be really good in football. They've certainly fallen off the ship a lot. They don't add a lot now, but back in 2010, that was a serious consideration, as well as Missouri was, and Texas was kind of thrown in there as a hopeful wish, but that obviously never happened. No matter the money, the SEC will always have recruiting advantage, especially with Texas. Yeah, no doubt. That was a huge swoon for the SEC. College football fans don't care about the money. We don't care that the money got added to the conference pot. Obviously the university admins and the presidents care an awful lot, but the college football fans themselves do not care. These logos, corporate logos, are going to be added to midfield now at certain stadiums. Ohio State had already did the Safe Light logos on the 25-yard lines, and now it's being reported yesterday by On3 Sports that corporate logos are being shipped not just for the bowl games now, but at home stadiums in football fields at midfield. So that's an interesting take. It'll be the greed that's coming in the sport is absolutely ridiculous. Now, to your point, Rand City, the migration to the South over the last 30 years has really benefited the SEC to make them the premier conference, where just elite talent floods out of Florida, Georgia now. Georgia 30 years ago was not a recruiting hotbed. It is now. Atlanta is a boom town, obviously. Everybody knows that. And, of course, now adding Texas to the SEC footprint, man, that is painful, bro. And that hurts Nebraska's program even more because they used to dive into Texas for recruiting. And that certainly got cut off when they joined the Big Ten, and now even more so that Texas is in the SEC. And so Mark says, Notre Dame just needs to join the Big Ten. Too much sense. Academics, region, TV contract. It really does make a lot of sense. They're dragging their feet with it and trying to hold their nose up in the air and be an independent school. And it's kind of wild to think about and think of, just look at proximity. It makes sense. Regionality, everything, it makes sense. Rand City says, imagine you see your team lose a heart-crushing game and all you see is those golden arches. I know, right? Right. Dude, I'm saying, right? Ba-ba-ba-ba. Nope. Ain't buying McDonald's ever again. Yeah, money is really flooding the sport because the popularity has grown ever since the BCS was created, a new, championship format in 98. And then, of course, we all know the college football playoff took over in 2014. Ohio State won the first playoff, first game in the playoff era, the first championship in the playoff era. And money is just continually flooding the sport. People migration has really benefited the SEC. And, of course, Ohio State's going to benefit from California. California is a crazy hotbed. And now we got the West Coast that we can tap into talent-wise as well. And we already did. Ohio State has had a lot of players come from California, Michigan as well. There's a lot of guys over the years that have come from California. Shoot, Tom Brady was from California. So, if that tells you anything. But yeah, man, it's gonna be insane to see corporate logos at the center field, midfield of college football home stadiums, and not just bowl games now. That may legitimately give me a subconscious hate for companies on certain teams' fields. Oh, without question, no doubt, it will. But it also subconsciously might help make you buy more games because all we see is DraftKings, BetKings, all these betting companies, and all these food companies are going to be flooding college football field logos for sure. Mark chimes in and says, who do you think has the largest NIL on the Big Ten? USC, Oregon, Ohio State. Wow. Ohio State's proven it this year that they got the biggest, but Oregon's got that Nike money. Well, Phil Knight is still alive. And so they have a shot for it too. Michigan always brags about their money cannon, but I don't know. I've never seen it, in all honesty. Walter says, I don't have a problem with Notre Dame joining the Big Ten. It will happen. Hell, if they join, they'll get home field advantage in the conference title if they make it, knowing it's in their backyard. Well, I've heard the Big Ten championship is going to be shipped around now. It's been stagnant in Indianapolis for years. Everybody knows the Big Ten tournament, basketball tournament, has gone from between Minneapolis, Chicago, and Indianapolis. Well, the Big Ten championship game is going to be doing the same thing here in the coming years. We're talking about, of course, the Rose Bowl is an option. Minnesota's brand new shimmering stadium, the Vikings, and Chicago's building a new stadium. So, and that'll be a dome more likely than not. So they're going to have that as well as to choose from Indianapolis. So it's certainly going to get moved around in years to come. We'll see that for sure. It says the same reason I love the SEC championship played Atlanta. Right? It is in your backyard. What's that, hour 15 from Athens to Atlanta? It's not far at all. Although I not to take a shot, but you gotta step up in the SEC championship game. Obviously you won your fair share, but Alabama's had some nightmarish games versus you guys, and of course last year as well. I think Georgia still deserved a potential slot. Slipping from 1 all the way down to 6 like they did. That's kind of crazy. Same what Ohio State did, losing to Michigan by 6 points, just like Alabama beat Georgia just by 6 points in the title game. No worries, Walter. No worries. Yeah, no, it's getting moved around for sure. It's kind of interesting that everybody misses that. So that's something that I just found out in the last little bit myself. Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, has talked about that, and they'll definitely be talking about that Big Ten media days coming up as well. Now it'd be interesting because the Conference USA, nobody cares about that. Obviously, nobody in major college football does, but they're talking about naming rights for the conference as well, which is kind of crazy. Saban is just that guy. It was a bad matchup, but DeBera is nothing compared to him. I agree. Rob and I made a video based on, back in, I think it was January. And, he's got some huge shoes to fill. Nobody wants to follow the legend. Kirby's ascension is nothing to be ashamed about, but they've certainly had their times of falling short in big games as well. Although obviously in 21 and 22 they overcame those shortcomings. So the Irish and Ohio State have a weak schedule this year. Notre Dame's schedule specifically this year is a lot weaker than most years, I would say, to counter Rand City's point. Looking it over, of course, they play USC. They play some other teams as well. I think they play BC, but no crazy eye-popping matchup this year in the regular season. And, of course, they got the transfer, Duke's quarterback Riley Leonard. Third straight year starting a transfer quarterback. And I think Chad Carr from Saline, Michigan, literally 5-10 minutes off the road from where I live, is going to take over the following year. And maybe, it'll be Marcus Freeman's first ever high school recruit to start out of high school for him. So in college, what's your thoughts on that team up north hiring the assistant AD for recruiting Ohio State? That is a story, man. That is a story. Here's the thing. Mark Pantoni runs the Ohio State athletic department. It seems like a lot of people are going from Ohio State, Michigan right now. Obviously, Tony Alford, we're not so mad about that. We got to upgrade in Carlos Loxlin from Oregon. But with her specifically, now she's only been at 3 years at Ohio State. She went to school in Delaware, then she was at Oklahoma State for a couple of years, Kansas for a few years, then Ohio State she was in an assistant position. Now a lot of people loved her. A lot of people on the team at Ohio State loved her, and so she's obviously very good at her job. For those who don't know, an assistant recruiting coordinator position took the head recruiting and organizing position at Michigan just recently, and that's caused a little bit of ruckus in Ohio State fandom. Now, had they taken Mark Pantoni from us, who is literally the lifeblood of Ohio State recruiting and was under Urban Meyer and has continued under Ryan Day, if they had taken him, now that would shake me to my core a little bit, because that man is a master genius. But taking her, it's a promotion, for her. It's a pay raise and it's a promotion. And I read the article. Her sister works in Ann Arbor as well. And so she gets to be reunited with her. So no hard feelings there. It kind of stinks, obviously there were some comments on 11 Warriors that say, oh, she's dead to me, but I mean, it's an assistant position getting to be the head honcho in your field. So I don't blame her for that. But like I said, if it's Mark Pantoni, the head of Ohio State recruiting department, leaving for Michigan, oh yeah, I'd have a lot stronger feelings about that. There are no Big Ten divisions anymore. We scrapped divisions this year, which is going to make the tiebreakers, whenever they get released, I'm probably going to do an impromptu live to talk about them, because that is going to have a massive impact on who actually plays for the Big Ten championship. You could have some years. They're really trying to step up their recruiting department, Mark, for sure. They could have some years where Ohio State and Michigan both enter the game undefeated and don't play in the conference championship game again in a rematch, because there's so many teams in the conference now that, depending on the tiebreakers that they release and the order they're released in, determined by the conference, you could see a team that didn't play one of the two Ohio State, Michigans, or maybe even a Penn State in certain years, and they get the benefit of the doubt just because they didn't play that team, and so, and maybe they beat the other team. So it's gonna be fascinating when the tiebreakers drop, because it's gonna have a massive impact on who actually makes the title game. There's gonna be years where it comes down to points scored against a certain opponent. And that's going to be infuriating, There's going to be years where it comes down to some obscure tiebreakers, because there's 18 teams in the conference, and it's a 9-game conference schedule. There's a lot of teams that aren't playing each other. And that really, really, really points to the fact that college football has transitioned from a regional sport to a national sport, where I grew up where Big Ten championships were the goal. You know, national championship was a cherry on top. It was great, but not important. Yeah, since '98 and the BCS came to reality, and obviously the playoffs since then, it's all about national championships now. It's basically natty or bust for a lot of fan bases. That's not the way I look at it, but that's the way the majority of college football now looks at things. So, um, interesting. I don't see Walter says I don't see any team having a dynasty anymore. I don't know, man. I mean, the rich find a way to stay rich, and the good programs find a way. Despite all the years of evolving and shifting landscape in college football, the elite teams and elite colleges find a way to stay relevant. And Ohio State hired Texas A&M's athletic director because they're adapting to the NIL era, and they're going all in with NIL. And it's going to be interesting. Mark says, where will TTUN be in the Big Ten ranks in 5 years? Oh, do I have my thoughts on that? I see a gradual decline. I see a gradual decline under Sharon Moore. I think Sharon Moore is a charismatic guy. I think he is extremely likable. And I don't say that about Michigan coaches. Trust me. Lord Carr, grumpy jerk. Rich Rod, pessimistic grouch. Brady Hoke, boy, was he lovable for us Buckeye fans. And then, of course, Jim Harbaugh is quite the weirdo. He wears "I was welcome everywhere." But I think Sharon, the decline will become evident. The coaching staff's not as good as it was under Harbaugh. They had an elite staff in 22 and 23. And Harbaugh took half of that staff to the league with him. And so I think a decline comes where in 5 years, I want to be careful how I say this. They will still be a relevant program in the Big Ten. I don't see them necessarily being a team 5 years from now that makes the playoffs every single year. I think Sharon Moore has put a concerted effort in building the NIL staff where Jim Harbaugh wouldn't. So that was a positive thing for them. I was talking about being a champion 5 times in a decade ending. I was talking about being a champion 5 times in a decade. Not sure what you mean there. Sorry. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. To your previous comment. I see what you're talking about. Yeah, so that's kind of my prediction for them. I see them slowly dropping off. That's just how I see kind of things going. I don't see them winning a national title in the next 5 years. But, I'm not a forecaster. I'm not a fortune teller. Ohio State has been used to being on top in the Big Ten and being the kings of the Big Ten, and we have certainly been dethroned in that position. And that irks me because we held it for so long. The majority of my fanhood, my fandom, I really started following in '98. I was 10 years old, and that was the first Ohio State-Michigan game I remember really, really watching. That I remember, and I remember seeing things happen. Then, of course, Jim Tressel came along in 2001. And I was fully all in from then on out. I was 13. I was coming of age, and that's when I really started following college football and really started following recruiting, knowing who the players were, not just the stars. Growing up in my fandom, following all these things that college football fans love to follow. It's just gonna be fun. So Walter says, I just don't think we'll see anything like Alabama's now Voldemort of football retired. I mean, it's possible, but to my point, so you think there's gonna be a little more parity now, which I can see because I can see your viewpoint because a lot of people are coming in with money and money is coming from all over now, and NIL deals are leveling the playing field for now. But when that regulation comes and drops, a lot of that money is going to go into the pockets where it's always gone into. The conference commissioners, the presidents, and the ADs are going to be the one filling the pockets, and the players in my opinion, are going to start going back to a little bit, more under control. Of course, they're going to be getting paid, but I think you're going to be seeing sports cut as well at major universities. The whole Title IX thing murks the situation, makes it a lot more murky, and so that's interesting to think about and to consider. There's so many things that I could see football going in a negative and bad direction, but there's also a lot of positives coming into it as well. So it's really hard to predict, especially with such a shifting landscape that we have right now. But you could be right, because 12-team playoffs makes it a lot harder for a team to win a national title. You have to win a lot more playoff games now than you did previously. Walter says it's going to be tough for one team to be the team to beat every year. And it certainly will be, man. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot of the haves and the have-nots separate even further, in my opinion. You're going to see, I don't know. It's interesting because last year was the most watched college football year of any year previously. Of any year. The most watched. And so I see the popularity of the sport growing, but I also see, even on message boards of devoted, committed, sold-out fans saying, I'm losing interest in the sport. And I can kind of get their viewpoint a little bit. I really do. So it's the greed of the sport is really kind of sickening to me, but it also comes along with the popularity and growth of the sport. So on one hand, I love it because college football is getting more and more popular. On the other hand, it's like, man, they're not amateurs anymore. They're semi-pro now. And it's just kind of the way it is. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up for tonight, man. I went solo dolo for an hour 5. Appreciate all you guys joining in and contributing to the discussion. It was really interesting. Hope you guys come back. We're live every Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Of course, videos throughout the week. So like and subscribe. We'll be back, man. And Rob will be back with me next week. And we'll go from there. So you'll see another video from us tomorrow, probably from me as well. And we'll be back to the regular scheduled programs that we do. We try and do Monday, Wednesday, Friday videos, but we're kind of shifting things up. There's less and less to talk about, obviously. It's the deadest of the dead period of college football. I'm trying to fill that void for you because there's still some things to talk about like we did tonight and some interesting discussions. So you guys have a good rest of the night, man. I'm going to sign off for tonight, and you guys have a great one. Thanks, Walter. Thanks for joining me. It was a lot of fun. You should watch Always Irish. He has some all-time rants. He's pretty good. I've seen his channel before. I don't think I'm subscribed, but yeah. You guys have a great night, and we'll see you on the next one. Later. Go Bucks and God bless.